Ladies and gentlemen, imagine, if you will, SNAP, the lifeline for millions of hungry Americans, twisted into a web of deceit. Guys, we're talking fraud. Retailers trafficking benefits for cash, recipients faking incomes to grab more than their fair share, and now with the recent government shutdown, exposing billions in abuse. In 2023 alone, improper payments hit 11.7%. That's over $10 billion down the drain, my friends. And just this year, a USDA insider and his accomplices, busted in one of the biggest scams ever, were siphoning millions of dollars off the program. It's not just numbers, it's stolen food from babies' mouths, eroding trust in a program meant to help the needy. Guys, when fraud feasts, the vulnerable starve. 42 million Americans, that's how many people woke up to find their food benefits gone, vanished during a government shutdown. Welcome, my friend Chris. How are you?
Great to be here.
What do you think about this situation?
Oh, it is a very deep-rooted issue. And I will say that Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins dropped a bombshell, calling the entire SNAP program broken and corrupt.
Yeah, it's amazing. $10.5 billion in questionable payments. Can you believe that? Even international crime rings I've heard of don't do that much money. A USDA employee selling access to fraudsters? And then you got the hungry children, working families who can't make ends meet. These poor grandparents. They're choosing between medicine and meals.
So which is it? Is it rampant fraud? Or is it a vital lifeline? And I think the answer is that it's both, and we have to explore both sides.
Welcome to another episode of the I Am podcast. And Chris, today, we don't have easy answers, but we do have the truth.
Yeah, and today we're going to dive deep into the SNAP fraud scandal. And fair warning, this conversation is going to challenge you no matter where you stand politically.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing, Chris. This isn't about Republican or Democrat. It's about right or wrong. It's about stewardship and compassion. It's about what we owe each other as human beings and as people of faith.
I mean, we have the numbers, the mechanics of the fraud. We have the political warfare and the deeper moral questions that come with that. By the end of this episode, I think you're really going to understand what's really happening beyond the headlines and beyond the talking points.
So buckle up, folks. This is about to get real. Welcome to the I Am podcast. Now, my friend Chris and I have been doing the research. And Chris, what does it tell us?
So here's what we do know. The USDA estimated that about 11.7% of SNAP benefits in fiscal year 2023 were, quote unquote, improper payments. So let's translate that. That's roughly $10.5 billion.
Did you just say $10.5 billion?
That's what they're saying. But here's the catch. Improper payments, it could be administrative errors, someone getting slightly more because their income may have changed, or simply criminal activity. But the data lumps it all together. So it's hard to differentiate.
Got it. So when Secretary Rollins said massive fraud, and they've only arrested dozens of people, what does this tell us?
Exactly. I mean, she claimed that they removed 700,000 people from the program. If they only arrested dozens, most of those 700,000 were probably cut due to eligibility issues or legislative challenges.
Chris, man, that's dangerous messaging, don't you think? Because when you look at it, 1 in 8 Americans receive SNAP benefits. We're talking about working families, elderly people, disabled individuals. But we can't ignore that this is real fraud, man. I mean, the Cleveland case alone, there was $100,000 and 17,000 illegal transactions. In the New York case that they talked about, there were 6 people charged, including a USDA employee, and that was 66 million in fraudulent transactions.
And those people absolutely should face justice. I'm not defending criminals. The fraud isn't victimless. When criminals traffic SNAP benefits, they're taking money that could feed a hungry child. But we need an honest conversation that doesn't paint everyone with the same brush.
Chris, let's talk mechanics. How does this fraud actually work?
Well, there are basically a few different types of fraud. The biggest is trafficking. Recipients exchanging SNAP benefits for cash instead of food. It usually involves both the recipient and a corrupt retailer.
Okay, so let me work this out here. I've got $200 in food stamps, EBT cards, whatever it is, and I go into a shady store owner and he gives me $100 cash and pockets the rest. Is how that works?
Exactly. SNAP benefits are trafficked that way. Then there's the EBT card fraud, criminal organizations, sometimes international, installing card skimmers at ATMs. They're literally targeting the poorest people.
Chris, that is just infuriating. It's diabolical.
It is. And that New York case, they had a USDA employee who worked in the division responsible for identifying fraud. And he was selling EBT license numbers to unauthorized stores. You can't make this up. He enabled over $36 million in fraudulent transactions. They were calling his bribes birthday gifts and flowers.
So we're not talking about just recipients gaming the system here. We're talking about absolutely corrupt, horrible individuals, whether they're government officials, corrupt retailers, organized crime members, whatever they're just horrible.
Exactly. And here's where politics enters. Secretary Rollins is heavily focused on illegal immigrants, claiming 50 to 60% of households headed by illegal immigrants rely on SNAP.
Okay, Chris, straight talk. What is the truth?
Well, undocumented immigrants are not, and I say not, eligible for SNAP. They never have been. Only certain lawfully present non-citizens can get benefits, and states verify status using federal databases. Now, parents of U.S. citizen children can sign their kids up, regardless of the parents' immigration status, because the children are citizens.
It's still taxpayer money. It's going to families that it shouldn't be going to.
Here's what's interesting. Rollins asked all 50 states for their SNAP data, and 21 of the states refused. They refused. She says that they're hiding fraud, obviously, and they said that it violates privacy laws and it's being used to build deportation lists.
But listen, Chris, man, those same 20 plus states are the same states that have all these immigration issues where they're giving cards to people to stay in fancy hotels and all these things that they don't deserve. It's not just fraud. It's an immigration issue.
I mean, that's what the critics are alleging, and the timing is suspicious. The shutdown, lapsing of benefits, and suddenly this national conversation about fraud and illegal immigrants.
Who's responsible, man? When it comes to feeding the poor still have to be fed.
But this is where faith and action meet, Dan. And I've got to say, I'm troubled by how quickly some people are willing to throw the poor under the bus in the name of actually fighting fraud. The Bible has over 2,000 verses. Did you hear that? 2,000 verses about caring for the poor, the widow, the orphan. Deuteronomy 15 says that there will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy. I mean, Jesus said in Matthew 25, when we feed the hungry, that we're actually feeding him.
Chris, even the Bible, the big book, there's some personal accountability, some personal responsibility that has to be done here. I mean, even when we look at the father of the modern church, Paul, he talks about a man not working, he can't eat, right? I mean, that's the way I feel.
I mean, yeah, he did. 2 Thessalonians 3:10. Let's go to that because context matters. Paul was talking about people able to work who refuse to. He wasn't talking about children, the elderly, the disabled, or people working full-time jobs that don't pay enough to cover rent and food.
Okay, so my understanding is that's the majority of this SNAP program recipients, right?
About 60% are children. They're elderly or disabled. Most able-bodied adults. They are working just in low-wage jobs. Median income for SNAP households is about $10,000 a year. So when we talk about, welfare fraud and people gaming the system, we need to remember that we're talking about real people. I've seen single mothers crying because they don't know how they're going to feed their kids. Elderly people choosing between medication and food.
Okay, so Chris, I'm trying to kind of pull this apart and understanding that I think what we're seeing here is that this is where this political divide really causes this challenge, right? Because we have to admit that there is fraud. We have to admit that there's also some culpability and responsibility that goes on. But how do we balance, okay, in the Christian world, how do we balance compassion with stewardship, especially understanding that all of this fraud is happening?
We absolutely need to root out fraud, but we do it with surgical precision, not with a sledgehammer. I mean, when Jesus cleared the temple, for example, he went after the corrupt money changers, but he didn't burn down the temple. Right now, it feels like we're just so focused on bad actors that we're willing to hurt millions of innocent people. I mean, the shutdown that caused benefits to lapse, that affected all 42 million recipients, not just the fraudsters.
Listen, Chris, we've got to find a solution. I was just noticing on the news, the Trump administration just posted that SNAP benefits are going to be reinstated, but people are going to have to prove that they're worthy of them, that they're truly in need of them. What do you think?
There you
What are your
go. So
thoughts?
I think that's a good first step because first we need to separate the fraud conversation from the immigration conversation. They're being conflated for political purposes, and that was clear during the shutdown. But second, we need to invest in better systems, better fraud detection, better oversight, and better technology. The technology, I think, is a big piece there. Third, we need to prosecute the criminals, especially corrupt officials and retailers exploiting our system. Fourth, I think we need to address root causes of poverty. If people had jobs paying living wages, if healthcare wasn't bankrupting our families, if childcare wasn't as expensive as college, if young guys like me in our 20s, 30s, and early 40s could actually afford a home, fewer people would probably need SNAP.
Chris, okay. This is it's such an important topic, and it really does get emotions flying high, doesn't it? So when we look at this, we've seen a lot of these solutions you're coming up with are really long term. We're looking down the road. What are we going to do right now? Like right now, tomorrow?
Right now? Well, we need to feed the hungry, period. I mean, we can fight fraud and make sure that our children don't go to bed hungry at the same time. But if we have to choose, feeding the hungry comes first, in my opinion. And Dan, this is where the church needs to step up.
Okay, wait. Tell me about the church, because this is the part I'm really frustrated about, Chris. When I look back in history, I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday. When I look back in history, I love medieval stuff. The church was the bank. The church was the organization that fed all the poor, that fed all the widows, that fed all the orphans. How in the world did we get to a place where the church has been set aside and all of a sudden it's the government's responsibility to do all this?
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, when I grew up, the box that was in our hallway, when I grew up Catholic, so we were in the Catholic church, just a little bit more traditional. I mean, the box had a plaque. So it's in gold, basically, on this wooden box. And it said very simply, feed the hungry. It didn't say feed the church. It didn't say pay for our great sound system. It didn't say pay for our new robes.
Yeah.
It said feed the hungry. And I think the overall overhead of that church was way lower, at least in my case it was. All of the priests were in a rectory. You didn't have fat staffing. You didn't have all of this weight in, CapEx and OpEx for the church. Instead, they're doing what they were designed to do, which is to be a light in the community.
Man, that dings a lot of bells, man, especially with some stuff that my heart's been feeling about the church lately. Okay, so we've talked about the church. What other solutions are there in the community?
Well, when government fails through corruption, shutdown, or dysfunction, the body of Christ has to be the safety net. Food banks, to me, are the obvious choice. Church pantries, food banks, it's kind of similar, just different people running it.
Yeah.
The community meals, having people going door to door, giving out meals, helping with that direct assistance. The early church in Acts, they shared everything that they had and nobody went without. And we need to recapture that spirit because churches can't replace a federal program feeding 42 million people, but they can definitely supplement and they can fill the gaps and they can provide what government never can, which is relationship, dignity, and spiritual care, which is what gets these people coming back to the church in the first place.
Listen, I think the church can do it because I read a story recently about Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins, I don't know if you know his story, but he grew up in a poor family. And he made a decision when he was growing up and started his businesses that he wanted to feed. And he started out with a very small number, 30 million people. And several years ago, he actually celebrated feeding his 1 billionth person as an individual.
Wow.
Not as a church, not as a group as an individual. So I think the church is a little culpable here. I think they can step up and stretch their arms out a little bit and do a little bit more. But we've talked about the church's role. Where does the government fit into this?
I mean, the government fits in a large role. I mean, but take a guy like Tony Robbins. I mean, he's a really rich guy. I don't know if he's a billionaire, but he's one of these guys that is taking a lot that could be going into the government that could be feeding the people. Look, Romans 13, it says that government is ordained by God to serve the common good. Feeding the hungry is part of that threat, and fighting fraud is part of that threat. But these aren't mutually exclusive.
You know, when we started this episode, Chris, we talked about the question of, is SNAP, as we know it, a broken, corrupt program, something that is just kind of antiquated in an issue, or is it a vital lifeline? And what have we discovered?
Well, I mean, look, it's both. And that's really uncomfortable for Americans because we don't like nuance. We want heroes and villains. We want left and right. We want blue and red. We want simple solutions. But the truth is messy. And let me just say this for reality is that Americans really need to understand that two things can be true at one time. And unfortunately, we've totally gotten away from that.
That is so true. It goes back to that. Can we have real conversations anymore, right? Everybody gets militaristic almost about their point of view. And sometimes we have to realize that there are multiple views that are real, right? Okay. So if you were to talk to the audience today, what are the things that they need to walk away with?
Well, I mean, look, I'd probably say three things. First, get informed beyond the headlines. One of the things that drives me nuts about my parents' generations, for example, is that they only watch the headlines. The $10.5 billion number, it sounds massive, but improper payments aren't all fraud. Dozens arrested doesn't justify cutting 700,000 people. We've got to dig into the actual data. And then second, demand accountability from the right people. If a USDA employee is selling access to fraudsters for birthday gifts and those really nice flowers that we were talking about, that's where the outrage needs to be directed. It's not at the single mom working two jobs who still needs help feeding her kids.
Yeah, but do you think this government's really going to go after the politicians? I mean, it's easier to go after the community.
That is a whole nother subject. And the reality is that there are systems in place to keep things covered. There are systems in place that are fighting back other systems. And what we have seen, and this has been clear with the Trump administration, is that they want to come in with that sledgehammer. And there are certain sides of it where that may be valid. But the reality is again, we need to come in surgically. And look, if I were to add a third thing, I would say get involved. Don't just complain about government programs because we're not going to sit here and wait for them to actually go after these people. We've got to support the local food banks. We've got to volunteer at the church pantry. Know the names and the stories of people who are struggling, because it's a lot harder to demonize welfare recipients when you know them and you've had personal conversations with them.
That's really true. One of the things I think we also need to do is truly educate ourselves on like, why do charities exist in the first place, right? What's happened is through the years, we've watched our society become so dependent on the machine, the monster of government, right? And if we could just educate our community to understand that it's not the government's role, it is a component of the government's role. But the reason 501c3s were created, Chris, is because the IRS wanted to give the responsibility of care to charities, to churches, to individuals who had capacity so that they could benefit, like tax-wise, to give money to a solution, and then that solution be used to offset and help the poor and the needy. But what's happened is this liberal left monster that we have in America has decided to constantly push against and say we need bigger government. The government needs to handle that. The government needs to fix that. And so what we have right now is a system that's completely polarized and it's messed up. It's not circulating on its axis properly. So there's a gravitational pull towards big government. I think that's a piece of it. I'll also add that, as a nation and as people of faith, this situation with SNAP really reveals who we are. And I think we have an opportunity to really step forward. The prophet Micah said it clearly. He said, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Justice means prosecuting fraud, yes, Chris, and demanding accountability. Mercy means feeding the hungry children. No questions asked. Humility means admitting the solution is complicated.
Well, to your first point, we live in the wealthiest nation in human history. And not only that, we've had more new money millionaires in the last 10 years than we ever have before. It used to be old money transferring. Now it's new money that's being created. So we live in a great time in human history to start a business, to become wealthy from scratch. And then at the same time, you add the transfer of wealth from the baby boomer generation that's getting ready to happen.
Yeah.
The reality is we have the resources to do both, which is fight fraud effectively and ensure no child goes to bed hungry. It's not a resource problem. It's a priority problem. That, to me, is a values problem, and that gets to the root of a whole country. What are the values of our American country today?
Chris, what you've stated here is so true. And I think that values issue is what we as a country and Christians in this country are going to have to answer to. Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, to sidestep a little bit, look at the average business. Most businesses want to take a look at their mission, the vision, and the values. And if you look at why employees leave the firm or the company, it's usually because there's a value misalignment. And the reality is that in America, we're kind of all stuck together. So at times we have different value systems that enter our political system. And right now it's clear that there is a lot of friction.
That's so true. And this is why we need Christ in the middle of it, right?
Absolutely.
He can help us put aside that friction, that strife. This Thanksgiving dinner coming up is going to be interesting in some households this year, I think. But we've got to learn to put these things aside and focus on the actual issues at hand, put down our political banners, and realize that people are the most important thing. Christ died for us, man, and he died for every person out there that's in need. So we as a Christian need to support whatever we need to do to help those people in need.
Well, the good thing is that at least Thanksgiving this year, things are going to be somewhat normalized. The reality is that the government is now back open. Those who are deserving of those benefits will be back on their benefits, and they can start to put things back together again.
In a season of gratitude, right?
Yeah.
They can be truly grateful.
I hope they're thankful for our U.S. government.
Amen. Thank you, President Trump, and everybody that moves this government forward. Listen, here's my challenge for you. Don't let this just be another podcast that you listen to. Do something. Contact your local representative, your congressman, your senator. Volunteer somewhere. Listen, in the Sarasota area, All Faiths Food Bank is an amazing institution. They serve 4 counties. They do great work. Have a conversation with someone who disagrees with you, guys. It's awesome to have healthy debate, healthy conversation, and maybe, just maybe, see if you can hold 2 truths at the same time. Fraud is real and hurts everyone, and the poor deserve compassion and protection. The SNAP situation is developing in real time, as we know from the little post that I mentioned that just came through, and we'll be watching it. If something major breaks, we'll be back with an updated episode. Until then, this is the I Am Podcast, and I'm Dan Baker. Stay faithful, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, my friends, you are not alone.